Hello and welcome to another timeless gameplay video here on the official MTG Arena channel. I'm bringing this from the preview event for Modern Horizons 3, so thanks again to Wizards for having me. And today we're previewing this Buried Alive combo deck that wants to get back a whole bunch of copies of Arclight Phoenix as early as turn 1 if we're incredibly lucky, but more realistically on turn 2 thanks to Dark Ritual ramping it out. So the plan is turn 2, cast our Dark Ritual at triple black, cast Buried Alive, searching our library for up to 3 creature cards, putting them into our graveyard. So we'll often go get 3 copies of Arclight Phoenix, and then we simply need to cast another 1 mana instant or sorcery to get back all 3 copies of Arclight Phoenix, and we might have even been able to discard another copy in the meantime. So that's what this deck is capable of. If we're incredibly lucky, we have 2 copies of Dark Ritual alongside Buried Alive, and we can already get back triple Phoenix on turn 1. But again, more realistically on turn 2. And then once we get Phoenix back, we can also maybe put Bloodghast in the graveyard with Buried Alive. This one comes back just by playing a land, and if the opponent has 10 or less life, it also gains haste, even though it cannot block. So this deck is all about turning our threats sideways as quickly as possible. And then rounding out our creatures, we've got Dragon's Rage Channeler, another great way to fill the graveyard, as we get to surveil 1 whenever we cast a non-creature spell. It's another great way to put Bloodghast and Phoenix in the graveyard. And then achieving Delirium is not too difficult, as we're actively filling the graveyard, and then having 4 card types between instant, sorcery, creature, land, even a couple artifacts is not too difficult. And then it will get +2/+2 flying and has to attack each combat if able. And then rounding out the deck, we also need some ways to discard cards from our hand in case we draw Arclight Phoenix or Bloodghast, and that's where Faithless Looting will come in handy. 1 mana to draw 2 and then discard 2, and we can flash it back later in the game for 2 in a red. And then we're also playing the full set of Highway Robbery, one of the new plot cards from Thunder Junction, and this is great at helping get back Arclight Phoenix from the graveyard, since sometimes it's difficult to cast 3 spells in the same turn, but if we plot Highway Robbery, then on turn 3 we can maybe cast Dark Ritual into Buried Alive into Robbery, or just wait until turn 4 so we can cast a free Robbery and then Buried Alive plus another 1 mana spell, and then we don't even need the Dark Ritual to get back all the copies of Arclight Phoenix. And then of course later in the game we can immediately cast it to discard and draw 2, similar to Faithless Looting. And then to give us a bit of disruption against combo decks, we've got a full set of Thoughtseize, another 1 mana spell to enable Arclight Phoenix as well, and then in a pinch we could even target ourselves as a discard outlet, but that doesn't come up very often. And then we've got a bit of removal with Bone Shards, which can also function as a discard outlet, or we can sacrifice a creature as an additional cost, and that can also work out fine. If we have a Bloodghast, we don't mind sacrificing, especially if we can immediately get it back with haste. And then we've got Lightning Bolt, adding a few more instants to the deck, so we diversify our card types for Delirium as well. And then of course a great removal spell that can also go face, so what's not to like. And then a one-off Demonic Tutor. This card is restricted in Timeless, so we only get to play 1 copy, but of course a great way to find our Buried Alive as well, since without it our deck doesn't look all that impressive, so we usually want to mulligan to find a copy, or at least have a lot of card draw so we can eventually find it. And then our mana base gets to play with 8 fetch lands. These can get our various basic lands if we're worried about some of the new non-basic land hate cards that have been added to the format, or we can get our dual land Blood Crypt, also counts as Swamp or Mountain, or even our one-off Theater, which lets us surveil 1 when it enters tapped, so that can also maybe give us a bit more card selection or help fill the graveyard. So if we don't need an untapped land, that's a great one to get. And then we've got 4 copies of Blackleaf Cliffs as a painless dual land that will enter untapped in the early turns. And then the fetch lands also great at helping enable Delirium for the Channeler, and they're also quite synergistic with Mishra's Bauble, since we can sacrifice Bauble, targeting ourselves, see the top card, and then if we don't like it, we can pretty easily shuffle it away by sacrificing one of our fetch lands, and if we do want to draw it, we can maybe play a different land instead. So there's a bit of synergy there too. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Channeler double Bauble gives us quite a bit of selection early. And now a Ritual could be exciting if we find Buried Alive. And don't need another Dark Ritual. So I can target myself, or I can just play another Bauble. And then decide Channeler at this point isn't super exciting anymore, since we don't have many spells to cast afterwards. And then we can have a look at the opponent's deck here. Dovin's Veto, well, that can counter Buried Alive. I'll hang on to the second bauble for the time being. Opponent cycling to get rid of the Dovin's Veto, so we don't need to worry about that one anymore. Could bauble them now before they draw, so we for sure know what they're gonna draw into. Up the Beanstalk, I guess now is a good time. Misty Rainforest. Okay. So at the very least I can looting, discarding Bloodghast, and then bring it back. I would love to find a Buried Alive, since we can immediately get back triple Phoenix. Highway Robbery. That's no Buried Alive, so I think I should get rid of it. And still nothing. Alright, so definitely discarding Bloodghast, and then maybe a land can go. And then can play Theater, and then next turn start casting more spells. Or I could still cast a looting now. I guess we'll wait on the looting. And then don't need Cliffs. Hit for 3. And then next turn we have a few options. New opponent with a Solitude now. Getting to draw off Beanstalk. Can exile the Channeler. Yeah, gotta get used to these new Evoke elementals. The Fairy. Bounces Bloodghast. Take or draw. Find a Phoenix. I guess we'll start with looting. Alright, Buried Alive, perfect. Bloodghast and Phoenix discarded. So we can cast a Ritual. And Buried Alive. Get triple Phoenix. And then, at this point, I could consider bolting Face. Could also take out the Fairy. Get back 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix. And, yeah, hit the opponent for 12 means another bolt is lethal. Bloodghast now also has haste. Alright, Swords exiles 1 Phoenix. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Missing Buried Alive, but we do have Phoenix and Bloodghast we can discard. Bit of hand disruption. So it's not perfect, but I'll give it a shot. Opponent with a Concealed Courtyard. Yeah, it's tempting to have a look with Thoughtseize before we continue. So we know what we're up against. Opponent cycling a Troll, so might be on a Reanimator strategy. And we see Grief, a Necrodominance, and Reanimate. Yeah, those are all pretty good. Necrodominance, probably the scariest card, since we don't have a way to remove it once it hits the battlefield, and we don't have a ton of pressure to punish the life loss. And then Reanimate plus Grief is still going to be pretty brutal if they find another black card. Or they might just get back the Troll, which we can answer with the Bone Shards. And Dark Ritual hits the graveyard. And the Grief pitching another Dark Ritual. Can have a look. Probably taking the Bone Shards and maybe one of our looting effects. if they decide to reanimate back Grief. Takes the Bone Shards. Alright, that's their last card at least. Probably gonna go for the Troll for a faster clock. Okay, we can cast a Robbery and then keep looting as maybe a cheaper spell so we can get back Phoenix next turn if we get lucky. Could also plot it here. That's probably fine since we're not getting back Bloodghast right now. Maybe better in the face of a discard spell. And a Dark Ritual could also come in handy. Alright, so step 1, Robbery, discarding either Phoenix or Bloodghasts. Find the Thoughtseize, not super helpful. So yeah, looting next. Finds another looting. So I can cast looting and hope to basically hit another Arclight Phoenix or Bloodghast before playing my land. We did not. Alright, so in that case, could just play Blackleaf Cliffs. We could also fetch Theater to Surveil. Yeah, I guess Surveilling's worth it. Just getting back Bloodghasts. And a Phoenix. Could have also opted to Surveil now in case we milled another Phoenix. But I'll wait until end of turn to get a bit more info. Alright, so we'll go to 2, so won't be able to cast a Thoughtseize. And a Buried Alive, okay. That's interesting, so if I draw Buried Alive, I can Ritual it out, but then I won't be able to Thoughtseize, but I guess we can cast a Faithless Looting flashback. So that might still do it. Triple Phoenix in the yard. Don't know if we were able to sequence better in case we picked up another Bloodghast to get that one back as well. And this is a little bit of damage to spare. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and missing a Buried Alive. We've got double Ritual, so if we actually had it, we could have maybe gone off on turn 1. I think it's still a keepable hand with Bauble and double Robbery. We've got a bit of card selection. Can start by bobbling myself. If I like my top cards, play Blackleaf Cliffs, if not, fetch it away. And a Bloodghast. I guess I could draw, although it's no Buried Alive, so maybe I should be a bit more picky. Even though it would be a fine card to discard. So maybe I'll draw it and then we can fetch for Theater afterwards. And next turn Robbery, discard Bloodghast is good value. Put on black-whites. While they are tapped out, we still have to account for all the elementals. So get a Theater. Could easily see myself adding a second Theater to the deck. Bloodghast is awesome to put in the graveyard. And there's a Buried Alive, okay. Well, I think it's go time. So let me make sure I sequence this optimally. So Ritual, Ritual, Buried Alive, triple Phoenix. I can still cast a Robbery afterwards, but not before playing my lands, so yeah, let's go for it. Just gotta hope they don't have a Surgical Extraction, that would be pretty bad. And then I can still cast a robbery. Discarding Bloodghast at this point. Okay. Get back triple Phoenix. And maybe one gets exiled here by Solitude. Okay. So not quite as devastating as it could have been. Opponent maybe playing a life gain deck. Still in pretty good shape. We can get back another Bloodghast next turn. A robbery to keep churning through the deck. And now swords, yeah. White removal that exiles is particularly effective. And do they have another one? Wow. Okay, so 3 Phoenixes exiled. Can play Channeler at least. And look for, I guess, more copies of Bloodghast. Don't need Swamp. And a Demonic Tutor, okay, so that can maybe do something fun next turn. If I get another Buried Alive, I can still cast it, although it's gonna be 1 Phoenix now, and then I guess more copies of Bloodghast. Yeah, that's still probably the play. So we can start with maybe Demonic Tutor. Channeler would be a fine draw, but we already have one in hand, so... Get Buried Alive. Cast a Ritual. And then double Bloodghast Phoenix. Now this 1/4 lifelink's actually pretty annoying since it blocks our Bloodghast pretty well. But maybe it's still worth it just to get in 1 extra point of damage, and then if we draw land next turn, Bloodghast will have haste. So land would be a fine draw. Non-land we can probably cast for a good effect. And yeah, getting to see the new Sorin in action here. Can potentially gain them more life. Cleric class extort. They don't pay. And attack. Opponent back up to 7. And passes a turn. We did draw the land, so get back Bloodghast. And attack. If they can somehow gain enough life for Bloodghast to lose haste, that would be effective. But now it's too late. Bowmasters can deal with a few Bloodghasts, I suppose. But that's still 8 damage coming through. Awesome. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a very promising hand. So we'll keep, and then I do need to find a second land so we can potentially combo off. So we'll start by bobbling ourselves. If there's a land on top, I know not to fetch. Bone Shards is a discard outlet, but that doesn't really solve my problem. So I will be fetching it away. And get a Theater, since I think I need to keep Buried Alive so I can cast 3 spells in the same turn to then get back Phoenix. Although there is a risk of a discard spell now. Speaking of discard spells, I don't think Thoughtseize is what I need. Although if I draw Thoughtseize, then next turn with a land I would be able to get back Phoenix. Alright, maybe Thoughtseize is good enough. So yeah, any untapped land here, which is any land in my deck, could set up a pretty powerful turn. But we might see a discard spell. Nope, just a Ragavan. And another Thoughtseize, sadly. So not what we were hoping for. Now, yeah, just have to Thoughtseize and then hope to get there next turn. And we do see some of the new lands here. Blood-Soaked Insights, Molten Collapse ×2, Reanimate, and then Fury. Yeah, Fury's gonna be good with Reanimate as well, if I take it now. But might still be the pick. And then the next Thoughtseize can take Reanimate. Ragavan hits Looting, which probably would have been a good draw for us. Since if Looting hit any black source, we would have been able to Ritual, Buried Alive, and then get back 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix at once. I'll still take an untapped land. Hopefully they don't have a Grief, but it looks like it. Felmire untapped. And there's Grief. So that can take our Buried Alive. And then they can still Reanimate, and looks like they even have a Not Dead after all. So they can Grief us twice and shred our hand apart, basically. Yeah, what difference a land would have made here. But just gave our opponent a window to take away our combo. Can take Dark Ritual. I guess we're pretty far from casting Buried Alive without a Ritual. Thoughtseize is gone. And Reanimate the Fury, because why not? Draw Phoenix, which we cannot cast, so yeah, just gotta pass it back. Can't do anything. And we finally found a land, but it's too little too late here. Alright. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. We've got Dark Ritual Buried Alive. Question is, do we wait to try and actually get back Phoenix next turn? Or do we cast it now just to get Phoenix in the graveyard? Kinda depends what deck our opponent's playing. If they have discard effects, then we might be better off ritualing out the Buried Alive. But I'll just go for Looting and hope to find a second land, which we did. And then, yeah, next turn, if all goes well, we can get back 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix. Get to untap. Alright, it's go time. So go ahead and Dark Ritual. And get a Blood Crypt. Cast Buried Alive. And then we can still loot. Maybe hit Bloodghast. Don't think I particularly care about Bauble. Good to put in the graveyard. Phoenix triggers on the stack. And they might get exiled here. Solitude pitching Ephemerate. Implies they have another Ephemerate in hand, maybe? No? Maybe their only white card. It's gonna be Reanimate, Solitude, exile another Phoenix, but our opponent's now down to 3. And Ephemerate to flicker Solitude, exile Phoenix, but the last one will cross the finish line, plus we had a Bolt as well. Alright. They almost got out of it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and this hand is pretty good if we get to keep all our spells. But that's not a given. Polluted Delta. Into a Swamp, and a Stitcher Supplier, so it is a graveyard deck. And looks like an Insidious Roots variety. Okay, so can bobble myself for now. And see if we like our top card. Mountain, not something I really need, so I could shuffle it away. And get a tapped Theater. And Phoenix, good to put in the graveyard. Alright, so if all goes well, next turn we get back 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix. Opponent hits us for 1. And we get to untap. So Ritual, Buried Alive, get triple Phoenix, and then our other spell could be a Bolt going face, I suppose. And hope they don't have some form of instant speed graveyard hate. So that's our second instant or sorcery, and this is the third. Get back 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix on turn 2. Could see a removal spell on one of them, but no, our opponent explodes. Alright, so we got to see our Buried Alive Phoenix deck in action, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Got to get back Phoenix on turn 2 quite often, haven't gotten it on turn 1, but we'll get there eventually. So yeah, overall a deck that can be pretty fast, also pretty resilient to removal spells, since we have all these threats that can keep coming back from the graveyard. Exile effects will be a little bit more difficult to fight through, as we noticed in some of our games, and then Hand Disruption can also maybe blow up some of our combo before we can pull it off, so those can also be harder to fight through. So Thoughtseize and now Grief as well are cards we prefer not to face. And then of course counter spells, if they can be cast early in the game, can also maybe counter our Buried Alive or Dark Ritual, and that's going to make it harder to combo off. So yeah, not the most reliable deck necessarily, but with a good draw is certainly capable of beating most decks in the format. Now in best of 3, the deck will suffer a bit more, since you'll have to contend with graveyard hate, and then mainly cards like Surgical Extraction are going to be pretty problematic for us to deal with, since they can just, for 0 mana, exile all copies of Arclight Phoenix or Bloodghast from our graveyard, and then it's going to be difficult to have enough win conditions left. But yeah, seems like a pretty solid deck for the Timeless format, so give it a try if you've got the cards for it. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.